Okay. How has reading changed the way we understand the world? This question is from my old physics teacher. He asked me this about my reading passion. He was somewhat puzzled to learn that I wanted to study literature and question what is there to gain from reading, especially fiction. Well, through fiction, we acquire knowledge. Of course, certainly true, like any other book, but let me tell you that there are many more benefits to read fiction than just accumulating information. Language is alive and essential to communicate everything around us. The way we describe something, it's essential to understand our surroundings. There are many ways to describe a single thing. The way we describe it or conceptualize it can alter our way of understanding that specific thing. So in any situation you are right now, if you describe it as full of disgraces, then you're living that reality. But if you describe it as a period where you can grow and you can learn from it, then you are living that reality. You're going through the same situation, but you're describing it differently. Let me give you a more concrete example. It's not the same when your mom tells you, "Hey, sweetie, please clean your room," rather than, "Hey, you clean your room immediately." Both of them demands to sort your room, but the association with anger or negative connotation, it's different. Words have power. They shape our beliefs, guide our actions, and ultimately crystallize our perceptions to create the world we know. There's a similar analogy in quantum physics. Quantum physics is a field that studies science from atomic to subatomic. In this field, it says that physical matter doesn't really exist, but everything is energy in different types of vibration. So, Werner Heisenberg, Nobel Prize winner and physicist, stated, "Atoms or elementary particles themselves are not real. They form a world of potentialities or possibilities rather than one of things or facts." So if we take this analogy into literature, the reader blends with the text, meaning it acquires the knowledge the text is given to the reader. So in simpler words, everything is a possibility according to quantum physics until you define it, until an author comes and defines it for you. Well, each human being has their own beliefs and cultures. This builds our individual perception of life. How many of you have read Harry Potter by J.K. Rowling? This novel series has sold more than 500 million copies worldwide. And I can assure you that none of you had the same reading experience. This is because of individual perception based on prior knowledge you have and the situation you're living in. So, have you ever watched the movies and got a little disappointed? Well, it's because of individual perception. Movies are just a way of interpreting visually this novel. I would like to do a little exercise for you to know how our brains have the ability to imagine things. So for this exercise, I'll read a passage from one of my favorite fiction novels, Fahrenheit 451. And I want you to visualize what I'm going to read. So I'll ask all of you, please, to close your eyes, and I'll read this passage. It says, "Complete darkness, not a hint of the silver world outside. The windows tightly shut. The chamber, a tomb world where no sound from the great city could penetrate." Now you can open your eyes. So here the author describes the darkness. He could have just said, "It's dark," but instead he described it as specifically, to convey specific emotions on the reader. Still, each of you had a different image of this darkness in your heads. Now I'll tell how I started reading. It was during the pandemic. During the pandemic, I started to read fiction a lot. Because I like how my brain had the ability to imagine and visualize everything that was being described. So I hid myself in books when things got worse globally. But then I noticed that I started to absorb different world views around me and the things I read, of course. Well, I noticed this when I read Angle of Repose, one of my favorite fiction novels, that narrates the story of Liam Ward. That narrates the story of his grandmother, Susan Ward, a very accomplished woman. He describes this woman as the most hardworking, intelligent, and best novelist of all times. And that changed my conception of what an accomplished woman is like. For me, an accomplished woman had only one single meaning. That is a wife, a mother that has a beautiful family and a house. And of course, that is an accomplished woman. But with this book, I learned that there is something else in accomplished women, that we can achieve many things. Okay, so this concept of accomplished woman wasn't explained explicitly in the book, but it was embedded in the narration. It wasn't even the main theme in the book, but it was there. And when I noticed this, I started to, realizing that words have power, and they influence my actions. Well, many of you might think that fiction novels are just like kids' bedtime stories. But one of the major benefits of reading fiction is imagination. It develops your imagination. Albert Einstein said, imagination is more important than knowledge. For knowledge is limited, whereas imagination encircles the world. Well, this is the most high benefit of reading fiction, because we can learn through imagination. From now on, let's describe fiction as what we can learn from imagination. Well, this is also supported by science, of course. The National Center of Biotechnology in the United States published a research on long and short-term effects on connectivity in the brain. This research proved that reading fiction enhances connectivity in the brain and can improve brain function. Also, Canadian connective Kate Oatley researched about brain function and fiction and ended up with the conclusion that, reading fiction also enhances connectivity in the brain and triggers the neural mechanisms of sensation, meaning what you read actually has a neural impact in your head. Well, this is very impressive, but I also felt the same when I started to read Frankenstein. I felt empathy for the monster, this hideous creature, because of the type of narrative and language that the author described, Mary Shelley. So the first-person narrative and the human personality the monster had make me develop empathy and understand the point of the author and the book through emotions more than just facts that we're reading down. So I'll read this quote from the novel that says, "I was a poor, helpless, miserable wretch. I knew and could distinguish nothing, but feeling pain invade me on all sides. I sat down and wept." Well, fiction has a lot of advantages and a neural impact in our heads. It can make us more open-minded, it can make us develop empathy, and it can make us see multiple perspectives. It teaches through imagination. It takes us to different worlds that even though they're not real, we are in them and we'll learn from them. Fiction, it's worth your time. And it's essential, especially nowadays in a world that we are in a constant fight over power and truth, where we need to be more open-minded, where we need to be more empaths with other people. And That's what fiction gives you, the opportunity to step into the shoes of each character that have a human personality that describes a type of reality from a specific perspective. So with that, fiction will teach you about yourself and the world we want to create. Thank you.